Today I'm joined by Zach from PaddyCapDice. And how are you doing, my friend?
Doing very well.
I recognise that backdrop from your YouTube.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is the dining room at my parents' house where I live right now. It's just the best backdrop in the house, so
Yeah.
So I like to use when I can get to it.
Because how long has your channel been going? Over a year?
So my channel's been going for about just over a year, about a month over a year. I started about May last year. It's been going since then.
So where are you currently in the D&D space? How often do you play?
Yeah. I was introduced to the idea of Dungeons and Dragons way back in about 2014. And I was actually on a church mission trip in California doing that. And one of the other people I was working with, I told him I have interest in writing, and I've worked on a few short stories and things. And he said, "Hey, have you heard of Dungeons and Dragons?" I said, "No, not really." And he told me, "Well, it's a storytelling game. You might want to check it out." So I did. When I got back, started going to school, and ran into a few more people who were playing it. And I thought, I think I'll give this a try. So I did, and instantly fell in love with Dungeons and Dragons. I'm an avid video gamer. I like to read, I like to write, huge nerd myself. And I found that Dungeons and Dragons as a game really gave me everything that most open world video games couldn't give, because they're limited by, the limits of the game itself. Dungeons and Dragons is unlimited by your imagination. So I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since about 2017. And immediately fell into the role of being a dungeon master. I really love that aspect of the game. I've also been a player. I played as a player initially, just to get a feel for the game.
Yeah.
And then started writing my own adventures and running those for my friends. And the YouTube channel came about because I watched a bunch of other D&D YouTube channels, and I had the idea some time ago that I wanted to make a YouTube channel, but I wasn't really sure what I was going to make it about. And I started watching all these YouTube channels about Dungeons and Dragons, a hobby that I'm very passionate about. And I thought, well, I can do that too. And so that's really what the channel was born from, was just, I love D&D, and I want to be a part of the community that's making videos about it, because it's a huge part of my life.
Yeah, I really do think that as people in that space, it's like a gift. And you look at people without it and you think, well, it's such a massive part of my life. How can I spread it? How can I spread the word?
No, exactly. It's really funny. Actually, I found myself introducing a lot of people to the game more than finding other people who had been playing for a while.
Yeah.
Because honestly, when I was going to university, there was a D&D club that I went to, made a character sheet, but it wasn't really what I was expecting it to be. They already had a few campaigns going. So me as a newcomer coming in the middle, I didn't really have a place to go within that group. So I just made my own group, and a lot of my work friends were like, "Hey, we have similar interests. Hey, I'm running a game. You want to play?" And they said, "Sure." So I've played with a lot of new players, and I found that I just have a little bit of a propensity for finding new people to bring into the hobby, which is another one of the reasons my channel started. It stems from a lot of my people I play with are new to the game. I've been playing for a few years. This is their first experience. And so, yeah, it's just one of those things I really find a lot of joy in sharing with others. And that is by far, for me, the best part, is building the community and finding other people show us interest in and just have a great time together, really, is what it comes down to.
I really relate to that, yeah, because I am only 4 years into being full on with it. And it's a matter of me having to pick it apart to understand it, and then thinking, well, if I'm struggling, somebody else must be struggling, so I'll pass it on. Yeah. So yeah. I totally get that. So what other things have you played RPG wise?
Yeah, so there is a really neat game that one of my friends introduced to me, and it's titled You Awaken in a Strange Place. If you Google the PDF, it's free, and it's just like a really simple RPG. It's meant to be finished in one session. One of the tenets of the game is everybody comes to the table unprepared. You build the world settings and rules at the beginning and play through the story together. And that is a blast. It's a great party game. It's a great role-playing exercise too. And so it's not as vast or like in depth as like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, but it is such a purely group cooperative decision making game that I feel like it really comes down to the core of tabletop role playing games. That is fundamental of it, and it's that game. So that's one I've played. I recently was looking into Dungeon World, and I've bought the PDF for that game. It's another simpler RPG that I've heard a lot of good things about, and so I want to try it. I haven't played it yet. And then I've been reading the rules for Call of Cthulhu, and I've taken like a small interest in Pathfinder. Haven't had an opportunity to play that one yet. A friend of mine from one of my gaming groups also had a Pathfinder campaign going on at the same time he was playing my D&D campaign. So he's a big reason why I'm interested in that one as well. I have heard the rules are a little bit more complicated. So that's one of the things where, like, I like D&D. I love it. It's simple enough, and I know enough about it that at this point it's my comfort zone, right? When it comes to tabletop role-playing games, I'm open to trying more things, but most of my experience is Dungeons and Dragons.
We ran Pathfinder this weekend, and you know how you can put the 5e rules on anything. You could essentially describe your day in life using 5e rules and what you'd have to roll. Well, yeah. Pathfinder, rather than you saying, "Oh, I'm swinging on a vine, I'm going to land on this big shrubbery," okay, roll dex, you just think that's the most appropriate. Everything seems to have a role already mapped out, so you have to look it up. Every action has something written of what you have to do, and so it's a much more planned and mapped out game. It's good for nuance, but in another way, there was a lot of, hang on, we better read what the exact rule is just to make sure we're learning this right. There's a lot more to learn. I was watching your create a character, I think it was your first video, I'm not sure. Yep. But and I've done how to do the character sheet and all that. And when I tried, it took me about 3 attempts, even with my son writing out a script, doing it all different ways. It's complicated, and yet you know how to do it instinctively, but it's telling somebody else, wow, it's hard work.
Definitely. I remember the first time I ever played Dungeons and Dragons, it was with my sister's boyfriend and his brother and their friend group were playing. And this was shortly after I returned from my mission trip. And I'm like, hey, I'm interested in playing Dungeons and Dragons. Can I play with you guys? They said yes. And it's like, great. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to show up on game day. I know I have to make a character, but I don't really know what that entails. Well, the dungeon master for that game, who is now my brother-in-law's brother, so I guess other brother-in-law, he came over like 2 days before the session. I was like, all right, let's sit down, let's make your character. And I'm like, okay, like, is it that intense? And it was like, the very first time I ever made a D&D character, like sitting down, we sat there for about 2 hours building my character. And that was mostly because it was the middle of a campaign, so they were between level 5 and level 10. So I wasn't making a level 1 character, so I had to make the character and then like level him up till he was matching the other players. And that was my first exposure, and I realized, wow, there's a lot to it, really. Once you know how to make it, you can sit down and pump out characters all day. But people who are new to it, who haven't done it before, it's a little complex. There's a lot that goes into it. And I've heard Pathfinder is a little more. They have like more options and you can have even more complex characters. Yeah. I was watching another. Actually, no, I think it was one of your Talk D&D podcast videos I was watching, and I don't remember who the other person was, but you were talking about how in Pathfinder the characters, a level 5 paladin in Dungeons and Dragons isn't necessarily very different from another level 5 paladin, but in Pathfinder, like once you cross a certain threshold around that level, characters can go everywhere. Yeah. So I think that's one benefit to having a more complex rule system is having that you can have even more minute details that create a nuance to the game that just maybe isn't necessarily found in a system with a little more simpler rules. That said, I do think tabletop role-playing games don't have to be super complex either. I think sometimes less is more, and it just depends on what you as a player are interested in and what fits your palette, really.
Yeah, I noticed on one of your videos you were talking about the 1D&D thing back then, where it said characters are expert mages, priests, and warriors, and you put in your title, oh yeah, I quite like that. Do you still go along with that?
So, it is complicated now, given recent developments in Hasbro's conduct towards content creators. I took a shift in my channel actually after a bunch of the debacle last year about, the leaked open gaming license that was going to revoke a bunch of the really great things about the original open gaming license. And a lot of the content creators I was following, they were affected, so they took a stand and stood up and said their pieces, and I took part in that. As far as 1D&D, like I'm not opposed to games receiving updates. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons has gone through 5 editions so far, right? And the thing is, like, when you're introduced to Dungeons and Dragons, and I can only speak for Dungeons and Dragons, whatever edition you were introduced to typically is the one you stick with. My brother-in-law and his friends, they still play 3.5.
Yeah.
They were playing that in high school, I didn't start playing till 5th edition, so that's what I like to play. So there's a lot of people, like, generally human nature, we don't like to change. We don't like things when things are new. It's a shift, and we like to be comfortable. So I am personally not opposed to games updating. I will say, like, I haven't made more 1D&D videos, and honestly, the main reason I made the video in the first place was, one, YouTuber brain. I thought, okay, I'm going to try hopping on a bit of a trend here. 2, I did have some genuine things to say, and the things in the video are genuine. I do like how they are sort of taking the classes and categorizing them. I think for character creation, for the player, that really tells you a lot sooner what kind of character you're going to be playing. I think it makes the character creation process simpler, because if you're approaching it in your new player, so, I played some video games, I played some other kind of, role-playing games before. A friend of mine, anytime he played a fantasy game, he always picked the mage. That was his go-to playstyle, his go-to character. So if you approach a tabletop role-playing game and they have, like, umpteen classes, like, well, what class should I pick? The 1D&D system of categorizing it into warrior, expert, mage, you can say, oh, I want to be the mage category, and then here's all the classes within that are mages. So I really do like the aspect. It's, as I say in my video, it's much more user friendly, and I really enjoy that. It's just been overshadowed by the conduct of the company that owns this game, which has been very unfortunate. Now, that's not to say that there aren't people at Hasbro, at Wizards of the Coast, who are all, at fault for some of the shady things that have been going on. But as far as 1D&D goes, I haven't been following it super close. I don't have my D&D Beyond subscription anymore because I don't really support the decisions the company's making. I feel like a lot of the things they're doing have hurt the community more than helped. But 1D&D in and of itself as a game update, I think is fantastic. I really do believe there are people working there who are passionate about the game. That's why they work there and create this game and work on it. So if you can separate the company from its product, which can be hard to do sometimes, I think the product is still great, and I think it has a future. I also think that there's nothing wrong with just sticking to the 5e rules as they are, and if that's where you're comfortable as a player, then that's where you can stay, and you can do that. 1D&D especially, because it's not a new edition, they're still going to be publishing 5e content. They've stopped printing the 3.5 rulebooks, but 5e rulebooks are still in print. And as far as I know, with what they've pitched 1D&D as, that's going to remain. It's not a new edition. So as far as I know, like, they're coming out with updated rulebooks. I know there is an updated Player's Handbook, updated Dungeon Master's Guide in the works. I don't know if they're going to stop printing the source books as they are now. But it also wouldn't be surprising, and it wouldn't be alarming, because that's what they've done in the past, right? This is just a company moving forward with a new direction and newer content, but you can still stay with what you know, and that's fine too.
So will you be pre-ordering even the new ones?
That's an excellent question. I would love to do product reviews, get in the loop of pre-ordering things. And from a YouTube standpoint, I would love to be the kind of creator who can do that sort of thing. Although, just full disclosure, given everything financially that I've been through, I'm not in a position right now. I feel like I can do that just yet. So, in fact, I'm in the habit of purchasing things when they go on sale, and I won't go. I don't go into detail about my financial situation, but at this point, like my YouTube channel is still pretty small, still growing. I'm my first year into it, right? We're moving. It's a big move we're going through, and we have things lined up. So short term, no. Long term, in the future, especially new adventure modules, definitely. I'm a big homebrew guy. I like writing my own adventures. I've recently started playing more published modules, and those are great too. And so I've thought a lot about like, okay, if there's new adventures coming out, when I'm able to, I'd love to hop on and be like, hey, here is we're gonna play this game. We're gonna play this module. We pre-ordered it, exclusive. Like, oh, we got it early, so we can show you some of these things and show you the play style and everything. I would love to do that. It's not on the table for me in the immediate future.
So give me a breakdown of what product you do own.
Yeah, so I have the 5th edition, has the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. And I have almost every other rule book for 5e. I have all but about 3 of them. And I don't own any of the published module books, the adventure books. Okay. I have Lost Mines of Phandelver because that came with a starter set that I got for my birthday a couple of years ago. But most of the rule books I do own, have physical copies of, and they're my pride and joy. As a hobbyist. And one of my favorite book that they've come out with so far is Fizban's Treasury of Dragons.
Yeah.
Dragons are my favorite mythical creature. They're in the name of the game, and that book I've actually used, and I'm writing another homebrew adventure that came from one of the adventure suggestions in that book. Fizban's is just, I think it's a fantastic source book. It goes into depth with dragon characters, and just it's everything dragon. And that one that one was also a gift. I don't remember if it's birthday or Christmas, but it was a gift as well. But that's my favorite book that I own for sure.
Yeah, I have a problem that when a new product comes out, I'll pre-order it, get it, I'll flick through it once, put it on the shelf, and never look at it again. I'm terrible for that.
Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. Had some spending money. I saw it at Walmart on a discounted price, so I got it. I've leafed through it once.
Yeah.
Haven't picked it up since. And I haven't run Curse of Strahd yet, right? I want to. I feel like that's a very iconic campaign to play. I haven't done it yet, so I haven't really, and I haven't played very many horror-themed games as of yet. That's still in the backdrop of things I've been working on. But no, I definitely understand, like, getting new books, like, oh, it's cool to have, then you don't read it. And I'll be honest, I haven't even read the Dungeon Master's Guide, cover to cover, necessarily. But I think that's the beauty of D&D. You don't have to read everything to play the game and enjoy it. But it is a struggle, for sure, is getting the book and be like, oh, here it is, and I'll look through it and I'll put it on my shelf and I won't use it for years. And it just tends to happen.
Yeah. Well, that leads me on to a random question. Let's go to the DMG. I pull out both books. I was looking through this the other day, and like you said, there's a lot in here that you don't know is in there. There were some variant rules I found, and I don't think I'd ever seen them. There's like variant rules on initiative and all sorts of different things. In fact, here we go, initiative variant. So under this variant, there are participants in a battle roll initiative each round. So every round. So basically, yeah, what do you think of re-rolling initiative every battle round?
I have never tried it. My initial thought is that it might make combat run a little bit slower because you're re-rolling and resetting an order every turn. I think in concept, I think it's their attempt at a more authentic combat experience, because combat is by nature chaotic. If you're randomizing the turn order every single round, I feel like that can really simulate the feeling of that chaos while maintaining order, right? which is the beauty of turn-based combat. Which, as you know, in one of my recent videos, I talked about how I don't use initiative all the time, if ever. And I mean, there are different ways of running combat. That particular variant rule, I might be open to trying it just for experiment's sake. I don't think I would latch onto it as a favorite playstyle, personally.
But imagine they're having to go twice. You know, you've gone last in one round and then you're top of the round next. That's good. Now, that's actually something we do. If we roll it's not really counted as a crit, obviously, but if you roll a 20 on initiative, you get 2 goes in our game. And if you roll a 1, you don't get a go that turn. That's just to spice it up.
Okay, yeah. That's interesting. I do like that's kind of fun, right? Reroll initiative. Yeah, you could very possibly, even though you went last this time, doesn't mean you go last next time. That does add a level of excitement to combat that you wouldn't have otherwise, is what it seems to me. And you mentioned, yeah, rolling that 1 in initiative, you don't get it. That's interesting to me. I guess I know you typically ask the questions here, but I have a question for you if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's a conversation.
So I guess what's the thought process behind rolling a natural 1 in initiative and not getting a go that round? What's the thought process behind that?
Because it balances out the having 2 goes, and it's like you have to think about what you're doing now. Your sword's stuck in your hilt. You know what I mean? There's something else on your mind. It might suck for the player, but that also makes me say, come on, let's get this combat going. People are sat waiting. And my players are all right with it. My players aren't like, oh my God, I missed a turn. It's like, it's funny. Everyone goes, I miss a go. You know, it's danger. The monster's coming towards them, and they haven't even got a retaliate roll because they can't go this round. You can't even use your reaction.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay, I like it. That's a really cool idea. I hadn't thought about that before.
Why do nat ones exist anyway? You could say, why is it possible to fluff? But that's because it's fun. It's fun to fail sometimes.
It's true. Yeah, and you know, how many times have you thought to yourself, you're looking like in the real world, you're looking at a dangerous situation, and I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll play it through my mind. How would I react in that moment? You know, like running into a wild animal, or even like, you know, if you're in a gas station and someone comes in and they're robbing the place, you know, how would you react in that situation? I like to think I would perform well in that situation, but also adrenaline. There's the fight or flight response that you have as a person. And I know this about myself. When my fight or flight response kicks in, my body goes to flight immediately. So then that one, like, okay, you rolled that one, like I just fail, I run away from the battle. Like I'm nope and out of there. So that's really cool. It sort of simulates that natural reaction that we have in dangerous situations, under pressure. Our bodies are designed to survive, and if the easiest way to survive is to run away, well, then that's what happens. You roll not one, you give in to your instincts that way. Or like you mentioned, you know, your blade gets stuck in your hilt. You know, we're faced with this situation, and like, oh, I go to grab my sword and you fumble on it because you're panicking, right? Your adrenaline kicks in. So that's actually, I like that. That's really cool. Yeah.
And what about if you rolled in that one you had to hide? It's like that's your option.
Yeah.
And dodge. I don't think dodge is used half enough. When people seem to rather skip goes, they're like, oh, I'll just hold my action. It's like, well, dodge is there to be taken, but it's very underused. Do you think that?
I do. And I think, okay, so there are actions I see players use the most are the attack action. I've seen them use sprint, and occasionally if there's rogues in the party, they like to try to hide a lot, but they have their special ability. I'll let them use that as a bonus action. So even then, most of my players, especially new players, like they're in combat, their thought process, oh, this is a game, we're fighting now, so it's fighting. So I attack every round, right? Maybe occasionally there's a healer who casts a spell, right? I was making a series of shorts a while ago about each of the main actions. Haven't finished it yet because they stopped getting views, which is unfortunate. Like as a YouTuber, you're always thinking like, I'm making these videos. You know, if I see it trending down, I'll go a different direction. Probably ought to finish those, but I did make one on dodge. Dodge is severely underutilized. I really do think that, and it's one of those things where I personally, in my experience, I think most players just don't realize that it's an option. Or if they do, they don't always consider it. I mean, most the people I play with have come from playing video games where if you're in combat situation, the combat is the entertainment, right? The fighting is the entertainment. Your attacks are what make that experience fun and cool. And so in Dungeons and Dragons, they carry that mindset over where it's like, I'm in combat, therefore my character needs to attack because that's what we're doing here. Even if your character isn't the best fighter in the group, maybe you have skills that are better for different things. But players tend to focus on the fighting part of it. And so, yeah, dodge is a fantastic action. And especially if you're getting lower on hit points and your healer can't quite get to you that round, maybe consider taking that dodge, take half damage, or potentially roll out of an attack completely. Yeah, it's there, and players ought to know that it's something to use. And I'll admit, as a dungeon master, I have not always been very good at reminding them of all their options. Which is one of the I want to say issue, but it's one of the things with Dungeons and Dragons. As a new player, there's so much in front of you. It's hard to see everything, and you learn a few rules and you stick to those, and then you might not consider that there's more at the table.
I try and encourage new players not to think about the rules at all. I say, there's something in front of you. Well, is there somewhere I can hide behind a rock? Yes. Yeah, you hide. I'm the dungeon master. I put what you say into a rules format. You don't need to think about the rules. It's like, well, I want to run over there, hide behind that rock, fire an arrow, and then if it comes close enough, jump off the rock onto it. I'm like, right, I know what you're going to do. You can do that. You don't need to worry about the rules. When it's your turn, I'll tell you what to roll. That's
how it ought to be. That's really, that's really how it should be. The players, I think that's where immersion comes from, right? Is you step into the game as this character. And yeah, the dungeon master is very rules. The rules are on the mind all the time. That's our job. I like that. If you're able to give your players a situation and they only have their character to respond with, what can I do? Then you've succeeded at the game. I think at that point you're in a position where that's the game. That's how it works. That is where the fun comes in. And yeah, if you run it that way, and I think even telling your players, hey, forget what you know about the rules from the get-go, that gets them into a mindset. They're not thinking about, they're not metagaming at that point, as it were, right?
Yeah.
And that makes for a more, I think that sounds like it makes for a more authentic experience.
That's why Call of Cthulhu is much more roleplay, because it's like you just talk amongst each other and say, well, I'm going to go get in my car now. And it's like, yeah, do you have a car? And probably look at your sheet. Oh, I'm quite rich. I probably have a car. It's as simple as that. You make it up much more readily at the table. It's very cool. So you did a video also about NPCs. I want to talk to you about NPCs. You were saying things. I've made a little note here. I wanted to ask you first if you do accents, if you do voices.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do. I will usually just respond to my players the way they respond to me. And by that, I mean, sometimes I have players who really get into their character and they have a voice for their character and they'll be their character at the table. I have other players who just tell me, oh, my character says this to the tavern keep. And then I say, oh, the tavern keep says this back to you, right? So I really try to respond to my players the way they are responding to me. But I do sometimes do voices, not very often. I don't have very many. I have recently followed a voice acting TikTok in an attempt to learn more about creating voices because it's something I want to do more. But I have a very poor Scottish accent I use for dwarves once in a while. And then goblins. Okay, I can do goblins and orcs pretty well because when I was a child watching Lord of the Rings, I would always, after the movie or even during the movie, I'd go off and play in the woods, pick up a stick, and pretend to be an orc. So I do orc voices all the time. And that's fun for me. Dragons, I'll do a dragon voice, make my voice deeper and whatever, and growly and stuff. That's the extent of my voices, and I don't always do it.
Yeah, I have started writing down people that I'm doing a bad impersonation of. So the people around the table won't notice an impression, but it keeps me in my voice.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Let's say I wrote Zach down. I don't know how I would do your voice, but I'd be thinking of you doing our voice, and it would always be that kind of voice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now you made a point in your video about, which I also just have an NPC always wiping a glass. That's all you need. And you've even said you don't have to describe every single thing they're wearing. It's just like, well, she's got long hair, she's always toying with it, and everyone's like, oh yeah, I do the rest.
Yep. Yeah, I think leveraging your player's imagination is key when it comes to NPCs, because there's so much to the world you're playing, right? There's so many NPCs, so many settings. So that principle goes beyond just not NPCs, even towns, landscapes, pick a few key details that your players can visualize, and then they will fill in the rest with their mind. I wish there was a way to look at what my players are seeing in their head as we play, because it would be so cool. You have 6 people at a table, they're all picturing a forest, but everyone's forest is a little bit different, And that's the beauty of the game. Your imagination makes it what it is to you. And so if you can leverage that as a dungeon master, then you're in a very good place.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So are you an over prepper?
When you say over prep, what do you mean?
When you play a session, do you think, oh, I've planned out 3 sessions ahead, or have you got it down to an art form of I'm gonna prep 33% of what I need, and I'll just be able to wing it from there?
My style is a little bit of both. I will tell you what usually ends up happening to me. I will prepare a session, prepare a dungeon, the encounters, ready to go. And then sometimes I find that the game session gets halfway through what I've prepped. Or sometimes we get through just a smaller part of it, and I find that I have the entire next session prepared, because every group is different. As you play with the group, you'll be able to determine how much of an adventure you can get through. You'll find what your player's play style is. If they love combat, they'll focus on combats more. If they love the role play, they'll focus on character interactions more, exploration, whatever it is, right? So after a couple sessions, you get a feel for what those players can get through in any given session. So generally, I will over-prepare for the first 2 sessions, because I don't know what they're going to get to. I don't know what they're going to get through. Depends on the group. And then after the second session, now I have a very good idea of what each session is probably going to look like going forward based on what I have set up. And so for me, once I have a campaign going, my prep time between sessions, even if I'm homebrewing, is a matter of a couple of small details. And that usually comes down to what they did in the session prior, right? If they talk to a specific NPC and they're looking for a certain item, well, I might not have that item or that location prepared for that session, but now that's something on my checklist that I have to do for next time, right? So generally, at the beginning, I'll over prep. I'll have a whole storyline going and ready to go. And then as we progress into the campaign, I'll prepare less and less of what I need based on what's coming up in the next session.
Yeah.
So my campaigns for me are very live documents, as it were, that unless I'm running a published module, which I've done a couple of times, but like I said, I've just started doing that more. The campaign, I do have the end in mind, but the details of what happens between there just comes as we play. So it really is a combination of both, honestly.
Now, this question might have you pausing a little bit. What are some house rules you have? So
some of my house rules are more behavioral expectations at the table. One house rule I have is no swearing. Or, it depends. If I'm with a group of my work friends, then there's a few words I'll allow, but like no F-bombs. Part of that comes from my religious background, but also just as a person, I just find it generally distasteful. Not that I don't enjoy things that have swearing in them, and sometimes a good swear makes a good moment. But as a house rule, especially because I have small children. Also,
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they'll be around the table and stuff. I just don't want that around. Other house rules I have. Let's think. Oh yeah, critical rule. So when you in combat, when you roll a natural 20, that's a critical hit. And what I do is I will have them roll the attack dice and then double that number. So let's say a ranger attacks the longbow as 2d6. They crit. So okay, roll 2d6. They get a 13. Well, they'll double that number, and that's your damage you make. That's my crit rule.
Fair enough. Is it minis? Do you use online?
I do. No? So yeah, we do have minis. I have for a while. I used other game pieces like just like generic, just kind of little pawns from any board game. Used those. I'm growing my collection of miniatures, and I have several now. And I have some monsters. There is a sub game under the Warhammer franchise that is Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
So it's Lord of the Rings game that plays like a Warhammer game. I've only ever found those minis on Amazon. I haven't found, my local game store doesn't carry those miniatures. It is pretty small niche, but I have a set of Ithilien Rangers that I got for Christmas when I was like in middle school. Because my grandma knew I liked Lord of the Rings. She saw this cool box of like, little figures and she got it for me. That sat in my closet for years. I did not touch it at all until I got into D&D. So I pulled them out and I pieced them together. Haven't painted them yet, but I'll use those for miniatures on the table. I have played online. I prefer playing in person with a battle map on the table with miniatures and everything. But I'm not picky when it comes to minis, and I don't have miniatures for most of the big monsters. So when it comes to on the map, I'll just mark on the map where the monster is. If I have a mini for it, I'll place it there. But if I don't, then it's just up to more pretend it's there. Or what I will do is if I have a bigger dice I'm not using, I'll place that like a D20 represents a dragon, for example. Yeah. I'll do that a lot.
Yeah. Next question was new classes or races. I often think, we need another class, but Artificer always gets a bit of a sneer from the community. So maybe adding another thing it's hard to come up with something, but have you ever thought, I wish it's a class?
I have created several new races and classes in my homebrew shenanigans.
Wow.
What I have found about the community, it's really, really easy to build a broken class. Something that in practice is overpowered. It's really easy to do that. So that's where I think especially the more veteran community who's been with D&D longer, right? I think in my experience, most people who've been introduced with 5e are a lot more open to homebrew. I think part of that comes from we're new to the game. We don't have a lot of the culture of the game. Like, it's gone from being a very niche, closeted thing to a very popular, even upwards into pop culture, right?
Yeah.
The broader audience. I think because there's so much diversity in the audience now, I feel like we naturally have a more open-minded lookout on the game. But yes, like I've had experience where I'll make a class, or my friend will make a class or a monster, and we played in the game, and it's just way overpowered, which is sometimes fun. I have made an assassin class that can instantly kill most enemies up to large creatures by the time they're level 10, which some people have a problem with at their table. But it can be fun just to play a super overpowered character every now and again. It's one of those things where, like, that's part of the fantasy. What if my fantasy is being a super powerful being that can, decimate enemies in front of me with ease? That's part of the fun of it for me. But yeah, I love messing around with classes and races. I'm actually working on a couple of 5e supplements, and one of them is based on fairy tales. And so I have 3 new subclasses that I created, and one of them is a barbarian subclass, and it's called the Path of the Trollkin. And so the subclass abilities and attributes come from the idea that your barbarian has grafted troll DNA into themselves. And so, for example, you have an ability where you can like regenerate health while you're raging. Right at the end of your turn, if you've taken damage while you're raging, you can regain that back. So I looked at the troll stat block in the monster manual and just meshed that with a barbarian subclass. And it's fairy tale themed, it's troll under the bridge kind of idea. The other 2 is a warlock, patron and boon, and then a bard subclass. Also, the bard is the college of storytelling, right? Again, that very fairy tale theme. And then the warlock, it's the fairy godmother warlock patron and the pact of wishes. So the patron part of it, the fairy godmother, warlock patrons will add certain spells that they can choose from when they're choosing new warlock spells. And so, I just picked spells that already existed in the in the books that are attributed to the Fae. It's a fairy godmother. So like you have like fairy fire is one of them. Pass without trace is another one. Protection from good and evil is another one. The idea is that this fairy godmother, who is your patron, either they owe your parents a life debt or they've taken favor with you. So it's literally like it is your fairy godmother looking out for you and protecting you. The Pact of Wishes, which might be a little overpowered, from the beginning of when you make your oath or whatever to this patron, the Pact of Wishes is that you gain 3 uses of the wish spell. And that's the pact. Yeah. Wow. So now it's only ever 3. You don't get any more than that. But you have those just for being a warlock under the fairy godmother patron. So that might be a little overpowered, but again, I think it's fun, right? It fits with the theme. It's a fairy godmother, it's the wish spell, and then it's like wishing on the evening star or the blue fairy or whatever it is, right? You get 3 uses of the wish spell. So yeah, that's something I've been working on.
Cool. Final question. I want you to create a quick monster because I've rung you up. I can't think of a new monster. Give me something in 5 minutes.
Okay. All right. I've heard of this thing where I have can I look something up because I have new monsters all the time. Do you want what kind of monster do you look? You want a big monster, or do you want like
aberration, like something hideous, something on a far realm, completely horrific?
Okay. I have my version of the Leviathan.
Okay.
That I have based on the old painting where it's like the dragon in the ocean and it's like twisting and turning, and I think it's like an old I don't know, like Renaissance era image. Okay. Pretty iconic. Anyway, I think it's actually depicted as like a biblical image. But my version of the Leviathan I created for a campaign that I was creating. It's a pirate themed campaign. And so I created this monster as sort of a very comparable to Thrask as far as challenge rating goes. It's a frothing, twisting mass of teeth, tentacles, and scales. The tumultuous movement of this beast on the surface of the sea churns up enough foam to block out the sun. When that happens, you'll never see the light of day again. A little bit of background on the monster. If all the terror of the sea is embodied in any one creature, it is in the Leviathan. This primordial creature is said to hold a destiny as the harbinger of the end of time. Legends of the Leviathan exist all over the world. The ancient people of the New World seem to have worshipped the creature. Magnificent temples and shrines can be found on the coasts and even underwater in shallow seas. The nations of the Old World call it a devil, the master of all evil. Many ships lost at sea under mysterious circumstances are chalked up as victims of the Leviathan. In truth, the beast is elusive, only ever sighted far out at sea every couple of hundred years. There's only one recorded sighting, written by St. August in 360 AV, which is my made-up dateline for that world. St. August, viewing the creature from atop a seaside cliff, describes that as Leviathan broke the surface of the ocean several hundred miles from shore, the twisting of its body generated winds as strong as a hurricane. Monstrous waves began crashing onto the beach below, eventually growing taller than the height of the cliffs, some 400 feet above the sea. The creature had a long, sinuous body, a head resembling a dragon, and the fins and tail of a fish. St. August described it as the greatest of the sea serpents, even greater than Jormungandr, the world worm. The pictures of Leviathan in the New World show the creature as being a chimera of every type of sea animal. Some show Leviathan with the legs and claws of a crab attached to the body of a massive fish. Others show it as having a head filled with tentacles. This has led some naturalists to believe there could be more than one species of Leviathan, while others dismiss the theory, supposing that ancient cultures were simply creating interpretations of the sea monster based solely on imagination. And in the stat block, Leviathan is a gargantuan monstrosity, chaotic neutral, has an armor class of 25, has 700 hit points, it has 0 feet of speed, but it has a swim speed of 120 feet. Has a strength of 40, dexterity of 30, constitution of 25, intelligence 18, wisdom 20, and charisma 11. Its saving throws are strength, dexterity, and wisdom at plus 20, plus 15, and plus 10, respectively. It is immune to fire, lightning, poison, cold, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. It is immune from being frightened or paralyzed, charmed, or poisoned. It has blind sight of 200 feet and a passive perception of 9, and it can understand and sometimes speaks primordial. It is a challenge of 32, granting 200,000 experience points.
Yeah.
And has a proficiency bonus of +5. It's amphibious. It can breathe air and water. It has legendary resistance, so if, like dragons, if it fails, it can choose to succeed instead. It has a multi-attack. It makes 4 melee attacks, or it churns. Now, the churn is what makes this monster unique. So it's a regular attack. It can either choose to make its 4 melee attacks, or it will churn. And so the Leviathan coils its body and moves in a figure 8 pattern for 1 minute. While it churns, all attacks made against the Leviathan have disadvantage. After 1 minute, if some of the Leviathan's body is above the surface of the water, thick sea foam spreads in a radius of 200 feet, originating from the Leviathan. The entire surface of the ocean within the foam becomes difficult terrain for ships and anything else treading the surface. Creatures within the foam are blinded. If the Leviathan is completely submerged, a whirlpool forms after 1 minute with a 400 feet diameter. Any creatures without a swim speed and any vehicles caught in the whirlpool must succeed on a dexterity 20 saving throw. On a success, the creature or vehicle is caught in the whirlpool but remains above the surface. On a failure, the creature or vehicle is pulled underwater and takes 1d12 bludgeoning damage for every round they remain submerged. Creatures and vehicles caught in the whirlpool underwater may attempt a strength and athletics check to attempt to surface with a DC of 20 to succeed. On a success, the creature resurfaces and takes 1 level of exhaustion. Vehicles just surface. Creatures caught in the whirlpool on the surface may attempt a strength 20 athletics check to swim out of the whirlpool. On a success, creatures swim out of the whirlpool and take 1 level of exhaustion. A failure on attempts to resurface and escape results in the creature taking 2 levels of exhaustion. Creatures can make as many attempts to escape the whirlpool as they wish, but if they fail 3 times, they drown. Vehicles caught in the whirlpool on the surface cannot escape, and they must succeed on dexterity 20 saving throws each round until the whirlpool subsides or the ship becomes submerged. Both the sea foam and the whirlpool last for 1 minute, or just 10 rounds of combat. During that minute, the Leviathan has advantage on attacks made against creatures and vehicles caught in the whirlpool or the sea foam.
Well, that sounds like a bad day at the office.
Definitely. And I made this creature just, I was like, what is the biggest, baddest monster that could exist in this world that they probably won't ever have to run into, but if they do, it's either going to spell doom for them or, they're going to be able to escape from it before it decides to target them as its next meal, Have
you heard of the Traumacratis from Mythic Guide to Odyssey or Odyssey or whatever it was?
So yeah, I have Theros' Mythic. I have that book, and I read it. And so I'm a little bit familiar with it. I think that was one of the sources that partly inspired this monster a little bit.
Because the mythic beasts, you have to kill them 3 times, don't you? They have like 3 hearts that you have to kill, and that's very much like the video game Shadow of the Colossus. If you've ever played that.
Oh yeah, I've played that one. It's classic. I love that one.
Yeah.
So an encounter with this creature would be very much like, hey, this is not a run-of-the-mill beast. You gotta have a plan.
I mean, a strength of 40 or whatever you said. That's just intense. But yeah, great fun. Thank you for sharing. And that's pretty much it. So I will hope everyone will go onto your channel, subscribe, watch your videos, and help you grow. And hopefully we'll do some sort of collaboration in the future, Zach.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah, thank you for having me on your podcast. I had a lot of fun talking with you. And any chance I get to share from my brain is I can talk for hours. So yeah. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you.